The warm sun came in through the big windows of a nice house in Atlanta. The sunlight made the wooden floor and cream-colored walls shine. It was a quiet morning. The only sound was the soft clinking of spoons and forks as Arya folded a napkin and placed it near her husband's coffee cup. The kitchen smelled like warm toast and turkey bacon. It mixed with the fresh orange smell from Arya's lotion. The house was very clean, just the way Arya always liked it. At the table, her 10-year-old son Jalen was eating cereal. He made little slurping sounds as his feet swung from the tall chair. His homework was open beside him, and his clean sneakers waited by the back door. Arya looked at the clock. It was 7:43 a.m., perfect timing. She poured more coffee and placed the cup in front of her husband, Grant. But he didn't look at her. He kept staring at his phone. "Thanks," he said without looking up. He was reading emails or the news or maybe someone's Instagram. Arya didn't know anymore. He didn't look at her when she moved his hair away from his face. He didn't really listen when she reminded him about the school meeting on Thursday. He just nodded and said, Jalen was excited. He started talking about a science project at school. He smiled and laughed. But Grant didn't say anything. He didn't even try to listen. Arya smiled at Jalen and answered his questions. She nodded and said kind words. But her mind was already drifting. She thought about mornings from a long time ago when they lived in a tiny apartment above a bakery. Back then, they didn't have enough money for 2 coffee mugs. They would share 1 cup, passing it between them while talking about dreams and hopes. Grant used to hold her hand and say, "One day, we'll have a house with a yard and sunlight in every room." Now they had that house, a big house with 5 bedrooms, a beautiful garden, and their lovely son. But something had changed. Grant didn't smile like he used to. He didn't touch her hand. He didn't even look at her. The man who used to trace stars on her skin while she slept now acted like she wasn't even there. Suddenly, Grant stood up. He smoothed his shirt and grabbed his leather folder. "Meeting at 8, he said while walking to the door. "Can you pick up Jalen after school today?" Arya asked while washing a dish. Grant stopped for a second. That pause felt heavy, like something was wrong. "I'll try," he said. "Depends how late work goes." Arya nodded. Her lips pressed into a tight line. She was used to this. The door closed behind him. The house was quiet again. She could still hear the sound of his shoes and keys. But he didn't say goodbye. Not even a hug or kiss. Later, after she took Jalen to school, Arya came back home. She walked around slowly. Her fingers touched the furniture, the artwork, the curtains she had made with her mom. Every part of the house reminded her of who she used to be, a woman who believed love would last forever. In the bedroom, she fixed Grant's side of the bed. She noticed, not for the first time, that his pillow didn't look used. Sometimes he didn't even sleep beside her. He said he worked late or fell asleep on the couch or needed space. Arya had tried not to ask questions, but the questions were starting to fill up inside her. That night, after dinner, she sorted Grant's laundry like she always did. It used to feel special. She used to find sweet notes in his pockets. Now she only found receipts. As she picked up one of his shirts, she saw something strange. Lipstick on the collar. A light pink color. But it wasn't hers. Her heart beat fast. She placed the shirt aside gently. She told herself, maybe someone bumped into him. Maybe it was a stranger. But when she looked in the mirror, she didn't believe it. That night, Grant didn't come home. He didn't even text her. She lay on her side of the bed, hugging herself. The clock said 11:17 p.m. when she finally closed her eyes. She wasn't resting, just tired. The next morning, Grant came back like nothing had happened. He smelled like a different cologne. He took a quick shower, got dressed, and left again. "Back late tonight," he mumbled. No kiss, no explanation, no "I love you." On Saturday, after she took Jalen to a birthday party, Arya sat in the living room alone. She opened Grant's laptop. She had never done that before. Something inside her said, "Stop pretending." She saw many open tabs on the screen. One was for a fancy hotel. Another was a chat window. She clicked on the messages. They were sweet. They were personal. One message made her heart hurt. Claire, last night was heaven. Can't wait for next weekend. Claire. Arya didn't cry right away. She just sat there, staring at the screen. Claire sent him photos of herself in pretty robes. She called him E and sent heart emojis. When Arya finally closed the laptop, her tears came. They were hot and silent. When Grant came home that night, she didn't say anything. She didn't know how to. She just watched him from the hallway. He placed his keys on the hook, kissed Jalen's head, and went into his office, as if nothing had happened. The next few days, Arya felt like a ghost. She did the usual things, cooked, cleaned, answered emails, smiled at neighbors, but inside, she felt empty. She wanted to call her sister or a friend or her pastor, but the shame was too heavy. Sticky like glue. She remembered how many times she told others how great Grant was, how she smiled through her sadness. One night, she picked up an old photo album. It had pictures of their college days, wedding, and Jalen's first ultrasound. She stopped at a honeymoon photo. They were on a beach in Tulum, laughing with their feet in the sand. Grant had his arm around her. She had her eyes closed, smiling. She remembered that girl, so full of hope, so sure that Grant would love her forever. Then her phone buzzed. A message from Grant. At work. Don't wait up. No heart, no kiss, not even her name. She looked at the photo again, then closed the album. The next morning, Arya walked into their bedroom with a small suitcase. She packed a few clothes. She didn't know where she was going, but she couldn't stay. Not just because Grant was cheating, but because he didn't see her anymore, and she didn't see him as the man she once loved. As she zipped the bag, Jalen stood at the door, rubbing his eyes. "Are we going somewhere?" he asked. Arya knelt and smoothed his hair. "Just for a little while," she whispered. For the first time in weeks, she felt like herself again. Her voice was soft and unsure, but it was hers. Something was broken, but something new had just started. The new apartment was small and smelled like fresh paint and soap. Arya hadn't done much yet, just enough to make it feel okay for Jalen. There was a gray couch in the corner and 2 old chairs near the table. The kitchen was tiny, but worked fine. On the first night, she and Jalen slept on an air mattress. Jalen held his stuffed dinosaur. It wasn't like their old home, but it was quiet, and it was hers. She didn't tell many people. Not yet. Not even her sister, who would have come right away. She didn't want anyone to say the things she already knew, that something important had died, that her marriage was no longer a happy story. Arya moved forward. She put Jalen in a nearby school. She signed papers and called the electric company. Her voice sounded strong on the phone, even if her heart was heavy. Grant didn't try to stop her. When she texted him that she and Jalen were leaving for a while, he replied, "Do what you need to do." "No, I miss you. No, please stay." That's what hurt the most. Not the cheating, not the lies, but the fact that he didn't care. The apartment had a little playground and a small yard. On weekends, Arya sat on a bench reading while Jalen played soccer with new friends. Sometimes she looked up at the sky and wondered how she got here, how everything so hard for her had fallen apart so quietly. Then one day, she saw something online, a photo someone posted. Grant was at a wine party. He wore the navy blazer she gave him last Christmas. He was smiling. Beside him was Claire in a red dress, her hand on his chest. She looked younger than Arya expected, not just in age, but in her happy, free way. Arya stared at the photo for a long time. The comments made it worse. "Beautiful couple," someone wrote. "Another power pair right here." The people in the picture were all smiling and clapping. They looked so happy. But none of them knew the woman who had made Grant's lunch for many years. None of them knew how she stayed up late to help him with his work, or how she held his hand when they were scared they couldn't have a baby. They didn't see her when he failed the first time at work, and she helped him feel better. Arya closed her laptop and sat very still. Her hands were shaking a little. She didn't call Grant. She didn't shout at him. She had done that many times already, but only in her mind. She had thought of 1,000 things to say to him, each one ending with him feeling sorry and saying he made a mistake. But that didn't happen. There was no big moment, just a quiet, sad truth. Later that week, Arya was at the grocery store. She saw an old friend named Dana. Dana had bright eyes and talked a lot. Right away, Dana saw that Arya looked different. "Where's Grant? I haven't seen you two in a long time," Dana asked. Arya held onto her shopping cart tightly. "We're taking some space," she said quietly. Dana looked surprised and sad. "I'm sorry to hear that. You two always look so strong together. I thought if anyone was going to make it, it was you two." Arya smiled a little, but it didn't feel real. "So did I," she said. That night, Arya lay in bed and looked up at the ceiling. There were water spots and cracks. She felt like the cracks were a sign, like everything in her life was falling apart. She thought about how easily people could be fooled. Even she had fooled herself. For a long time, she thought staying with Grant, even when things were hard, was the same as love. She believed that standing by his side was the most loyal thing she could do, so she ignored the bad parts. She told herself everything was okay, but grace, the kindness she gave, had limits. Now, all the pain she had kept inside felt too big. It felt like water behind a wall, ready to break. Her son Jalen was doing better than she expected. Kids can bounce back more easily than grown-ups. He made new friends, liked his new school, and didn't seem to mind the smaller apartment. But one night, as she tucked him into bed, he asked, "When is Daddy coming to visit us here?" Arya's throat felt tight. "He's busy with work right now," she said softly, "but you can always talk to him." Jalen nodded, but he didn't look happy. Still, he was too sleepy to argue. After he was asleep, Arya sat on the small balcony, wrapped in a blanket. She looked out at the city lights. She thought about calling her mom, her sister, or her pastor. But she didn't want to explain everything again. It made her feel sick just thinking about it. So instead, she opened her laptop and started to write. She didn't know what she was writing. Maybe a letter she'd never send. Maybe just words for herself. At the top, she typed, "What I know." The first line was easy. "I know he loved me once." Then, "I know I loved him longer than he deserved." And finally, "I know this isn't my fault." She wrote for hours. Her words felt like water finally spilling out. She wrote about how he stopped laughing at her jokes, how he stopped saying her name, how his eyes lit up when he looked at others but not at her. In the morning, she printed the pages and put them in a folder. She didn't read them again, but holding them made her feel seen. On a rainy Sunday, Arya's sister Mira called. "I know something's wrong," Mira said. "You've been ignoring me." Arya leaned on the kitchen counter. "It's over," she said. There was a quiet pause. "Did he cheat?" Mira asked. "Yes," Arya said. "With someone I know. Her name is Sienna." Mira took a deep breath. "Do you want me to come visit?" "No," Arya said. "I just needed to say it out loud." They didn't talk for a moment. Then Mira said, "He doesn't get to decide how your story ends. Don't let this be the last chapter." That night, Arya looked around her apartment. The boxes were still not unpacked. The walls were empty. The lamp near the door blinked sometimes. It wasn't fancy, but it was a new start. She pulled out her folder of writing and added one last sentence. "I am not broken. The only thing worse than losing him would be losing myself trying to keep him." She put the folder on her nightstand and turned off the lamp. Across the city, in the house that used to be hers, Sienna was lighting candles. Grant was pouring wine and laughing. He looked happy, but Arya didn't care anymore. She knew the truth, and the truth, even if it hurt, was the only way to feel free. The next morning, the sky was gray. Rain tapped gently on the windows. It sounded like someone breathing slowly. Arya stood in the kitchen, holding a coffee mug. She didn't drink from it. She looked out at the wet courtyard. Kids in raincoats walked to the bus stop, jumping in puddles. Jalen had left earlier, wearing his blue raincoat. His backpack bounced as he waved goodbye. He didn't wait for her to wave back. He was adjusting so fast it surprised her. Maybe kids know how to let go of things better than adults do. The apartment was very quiet now. Too quiet. Arya missed the old house, the creaky stairs, Grant's voice on work calls, Jalen's cartoons playing. Here, everything felt new and strange. Every silence felt full of meaning. She sat at the little table. Her coffee was still warm, but she didn't sip it. She found an old notebook in a box. It was leather and had her sketches from college, floor plans, drawings, and little notes with coffee stains. It reminded her of her old dreams. Now she would use it for something new. A story, a way to let go, a way to heal. She turned to a blank page and started writing. At first, the words came slowly, but then, like before, they flowed out. She wrote about the lipstick on Grant's shirt, about the messages from Sienna, about the picture that everyone had seen. She wrote how he stopped saying her name, like it didn't matter anymore. She didn't try to sound smart or brave, she just told the truth. After a long time, her hand was tired and her coffee was cold. But something in her heart felt lighter, like a window had finally opened. That afternoon, she pulled a plastic box from the closet. Inside were pictures, papers, and a folder from her college class, Arch 112. She opened it and saw her old designs, curved buildings, notes about sunlight, and ideas about helping the planet. It made her smile. She remembered how much she loved designing. That was before Grant's dreams became more important than her own. For the next few days, Arya made a new routine. She set an alarm. She wore clothes that made her feel good, not just comfortable. She walked Jalen to school, even when it rained. She cooked meals again, not to please Grant, but to take care of herself. But even with these changes, the silence stayed. It followed her through the store. It sat beside her on the couch when she watched old shows. It crawled into her bed at night and made her feel numb. One night, she reached for her phone and called Mira. She didn't really want to talk, but she needed a voice. "Hey," Mira answered. "Hey," Arya said. "I don't know if I'm okay." They talked a little. Mira told her about yoga class, about their mom, and about a movie that reminded her of them as kids. Arya listened. She didn't say much, but hearing someone talk made her feel better. Before they hung up, Mira said gently, "You're not alone, Arya, even when it feels like it." That night, Arya opened her sketchbook again, but this time she didn't draw buildings. She just made lines, swirls, and shapes. Her hand moved like it remembered how. She felt her breath slow down. It wasn't a masterpiece, but it was hers. The next morning, Arya looked in the mirror. She didn't look broken. She looked tired, yes, but her eyes still had a little shine. She stood up straighter and told herself the truth. Grant didn't break her. He just stopped being good enough for her. 1 week later, she applied for a job at a small architecture firm. The company was run by women and helped make better homes for people. Her old college teacher had sent her the job ad. He wrote, "You still have it in you. Don't forget that." Arya almost didn't apply. She almost talked herself out of it. But then Jalen saw her at the laptop and asked, "What are you doing?" "Something brave," she said. Then she clicked send. When the firm asked her for an interview, she felt both happy and scared. She looked in her closet. Nothing felt right. Her old clothes reminded her of the past. So she went shopping by herself. She picked a green dress that fit her just right and shoes that made her feel tall. In the mirror, she looked at herself and thought, "You're still in there." The day of the interview was cold but sunny. She got there early. Her hands were sweaty, and she held her folder tightly. The office was in an old warehouse with lots of windows and plants. It didn't feel scary. It felt full of life. The interview went well. The lead architect, a woman named Celine, had silver and black hair and kind eyes. She asked smart questions and really listened. When Arya showed one of her old designs, Celine looked at it for a while. Then she said, "You don't just think about how things look, you think about how they feel. That's special." When Arya walked out of the building, the wind grabbed her scarf and made it fly behind her like a superhero cape. She laughed, surprised to hear herself so happy. 2 days later, she got a job offer. She started working on a Monday. The office was full of energy. People were talking and working together. Her first task was small. She had to design a reading room for kids at the city library, but it was a start. She liked staying late, not because she had to, but because she loved her work. At first, she didn't talk much to her coworkers. She just said her name, where she worked before, and smiled politely. No one asked about her personal life, and she didn't tell. But one day, during a break, a woman named Leora said softly, "You seem kind, like someone who has been through something hard, but didn't let it make her mean." Arya's eyes blinked fast. Her throat felt tight. "Thank you," she whispered. That evening, she picked up her son Jalen from school and got ice cream, just because. They sat in the car, windows foggy from the cold, laughing. Jalen told her how he won a spelling bee. She smiled and thought, this is still a life, a good one. Later, as she tucked Jalen into bed, he touched her face. "You're happy," he said. She nodded, tears in her eyes. "Getting there." After he fell asleep, Arya went to her desk. She opened her notebook and wrote on a new page. "Silence is no longer my prison. It's my armor. And under it, this is not the end. This is where I begin again." The next morning, Arya came to the office very early. The janitor was just finishing cleaning the floors. She smelled the fresh pine cleaner as she walked to her desk. Her low heels clicked on the quiet floor. Her key card beeped softly as she opened the workroom. She stood at her table and looked at the sunlight shining through the big windows. Arya had started to like silence again. But this time, it didn't feel heavy. It gave her room to think and grow. It had been 3 months since she started. The office now felt like home. The team had learned to respect her. At first, people were careful around her, but slowly they began to trust her. Arya's work spoke for her. Her designs showed quiet strength. She earned her place. Her current project was a garden and gathering space for a poor neighborhood in Edgewood. She worked on it day and night, making it just right. She wanted it to be clear, beautiful, and easy for everyone to enjoy. This project reminded her why she loved architecture, not for tall buildings, but for helping people. Her boss, Celine, started giving her more responsibility. One day she said, "You don't talk much, but when you do, people listen. Use that." Arya felt strange hearing that, but it also felt true. She remembered the young woman she used to be, standing in classrooms, showing her work, and believing her voice could change the world. At home, things had changed too. Jalen was more confident. He didn't ask about his dad, Grant, as often. When he did, he seemed to understand. Arya told him gently, "Daddy made choices that didn't include us, but we're okay." She had stopped checking Grant's social media. She didn't look for signs of his new partner, Sienna. That chapter of her life was quietly closing. But sometimes, the past comes back. One Thursday, Celine called Arya to her office with news. The community project was picked for a city program. There would be news stories, meetings with city leaders, and more money. Arya's name would be on the project as the leader. "You've earned this," Celine said. "I need you to step into the light." That night, Arya made her favorite stew and bought a bottle of wine. She and Jalen ate on the couch, watching a funny cartoon they both liked. For the first time in years, she felt joy, not because someone else gave it to her, but because she had built something strong. But peace doesn't always last. The next morning, Grant came to her door. Arya opened it slowly. He looked tired. His beard was messy, his clothes wrinkled. "I was in the neighborhood," he said. She knew that wasn't true. She didn't let him inside. She stepped out and closed the door behind her. "What do you want, Grant?" she asked. He looked sad. "I've been thinking. I messed up. Sienna and she left." "I'm sorry to hear that," Arya said calmly. "I was hoping we could talk. Maybe dinner for Jalen? Jalen is fine, Arya said. He's doing great. You're really not going to give me a chance? He asked. A chance for what? To undo what's done? I didn't mean to hurt you, he said. I was stressed. I wasn't your stress reliever, Grant, she said. I was your wife. You didn't get lost. You walked away. He had no reply, just a sigh. Then he left. Arya watched him go and didn't feel sad. Later that week, while doing tax papers for work, Arya found something strange. There was a loan taken out in both her and Grant's names. It was from 9 months ago. Her name was listed as someone who signed it, but she never did. She looked closer. Her signature was there, carefully copied. Her middle name's S even had the same curve. It was fake. Her hands shook as she printed the papers and put them in her notebook. Then she called her friend Elmira. This isn't just about love, she said. He used my name. Lemira said right away, you need a lawyer, a good one. That night, Arya made tea and sat at her desk. She opened her notebook to a clean page and wrote, he stole more than my trust. She wrote down every paper she remembered signing, and every one she didn't. She added dates, numbers, and names. She felt angry, not hot anger, but cool and clear. She was ready. The next day, she met with a lawyer named Dorian Wells. He was young, but very smart. He listened carefully and took notes. After she finished, he said, you have a strong case. This isn't just for divorce. It's fraud. That's a crime. We can challenge your whole marriage agreement. I don't want to ruin him, Arya said. I just want to protect myself and Jalen. Then we build the case with care and proof, Dorian said. She left the office with a folder full of papers and a strong feeling inside. Not of revenge, but truth. When she got home, she took out a pale blue dress she hadn't worn in years. It didn't fit the same, but it still made her feel strong. She looked in the mirror and whispered, let them think I'm weak. That's their mistake. That weekend, she sat in the park with Jalen, drinking coffee while he played soccer. She felt something new. Power. Not over anyone else, but over herself. She had gotten back up, and this time, she wouldn't fall again. The day she filed the legal papers, Arya stood in her kitchen. She held the folder tight. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from finally letting go. It felt like her life had weight again, the kind that gives you shape. She set the folder down and walked into her bedroom. Outside, spring was starting. Trees were getting green again, but inside Arya's world, something else was blooming. Something stronger. She sat on her bed and opened her laptop. Dorian had sent her a list of documents to help her case. She looked through each one slowly. She needed to see the truth for herself. Truth can be hard. It doesn't try to be gentle, but it stands tall. Grant had used her name and trust. While she packed lunches and helped with homework, he had signed papers behind her back. Some loans already failed. Her name, once full of dreams, was now written on debts. She didn't cry. That kind of pain was over. She pulled out a notepad. She wrote a list of the loans. Next to each one, she wrote either mine or his. It was her way of taking back what belonged to her. When Jalen came home from school, she smiled, helped with his homework, and made grilled cheese sandwiches, cut just right. That simple moment kept her strong. Jalen didn't need to know everything yet. His world was still whole. She would keep it that way. That night, after he was asleep, she called Mira. He didn't just lie to me, she said. He used me. Mira was quiet for a moment. She said kindly, you don't need to feel bad. He should be the one who's ashamed. Arya nodded. I know you still want to help me with the annulment. I've already filed the papers. The silence that followed was not empty. It felt full of love, full of understanding, and full of strength. These two sisters had seen a lot in life. They both knew how hard it was for a woman to stand up and choose herself. The next week, Dorian, Arya's lawyer, called her with some news. We'll be giving Grant the official papers on Friday, he said. If you want to stay ahead of the drama, get ready. Arya knew what that meant. Grant wouldn't stay quiet. He didn't love her enough to protect her, but his pride wouldn't let her leave without a fuss. Still, Arya was ready. She knew who Grant really was now, but more importantly, she knew who she was too. On Thursday afternoon, Arya got a text from Grant. "Grant, can we talk?" Arya stared at the message, then replied, "About what?" "I've been hearing things. Let's be adults. No need to make it ugly." His words felt fake. They looked smooth and calm, but they were just trying to hide his fear. Arya didn't answer. That night, Arya stood in front of her closet. She looked at all the dresses she hadn't worn in years. Most of them still smelled like the past, like company dinners, wedding anniversaries, and holidays where she had to smile and pretend. She touched a soft, beige gown. She had worn it 5 years ago to a fancy charity event. It was simple but pretty. She hadn't worn it since. She pulled it out and hung it on the door. In the morning, she would have it pressed. She also made a phone call. "I'd like to book a limousine," she said clearly. The woman on the other end asked, "What day and where to?" "Friday. The county courthouse." There was a pause. "And the return trip?" Arya smiled softly. "No return needed." On Friday morning, Arya woke up very early. She made breakfast for her son, Jalen, packed his lunch, and walked him to the school bus. Then she went home. She took her time getting dressed. She put on her makeup slowly and carefully. She wore a thin gold necklace, the same one she had worn on her wedding day. Not because she wanted to remember Grant, but because she was ready to bury those memories with peace. At exactly 10:15 a.m., the black limousine arrived. It was shiny and quiet. Arya stepped in without fear. Her hands rested calmly in her lap as the city passed by outside the window. When they got to the courthouse, there was a small crowd. Not too many people, but enough. Some were Grant's friends. Others had heard about the annulment and wanted to see what would happen. Arya could feel their eyes watching her as she stepped out of the car. But she didn't hide. She walked with grace. Her heels clicked on the ground like little drum beats. At the top of the steps, Grant was waiting. Sienna stood next to him, but she didn't look very strong. She looked nervous and unsure. Grant, however, looked very angry. He opened his mouth to speak, but Arya walked past them without saying a word. Her eyes were fixed on the big courtroom doors. Inside, Dorian nodded at her. "Are you ready?" She nodded back. "Yes." The hearing began. The judge read through the papers slowly. She paused a few times. There was a lot to look at: fake signatures, secret loans, and messages from Grant. Grant's lawyer tried to argue. He said things weren't that bad. He tried to make it seem like a small mistake. But Dorian was calm, focused, and very clear. Then it was Arya's turn. She stood up. Her voice was steady. "I trusted him," she said. "With my name, my time, my future, I believed in our marriage and in our promises. But while I was believing, he was using me. He signed my name on loans I didn't agree to. He made choices that hurt me without asking. That's not love. That's not marriage. That's manipulation." She looked at the judge, then at Grant. "This isn't about revenge. It's about truth, and truth shouldn't be hidden." The courtroom was very quiet. Then the judge spoke. "Based on what I've seen and heard, I believe this marriage happened under false promises. The annulment is granted. Legally, this marriage never existed." Arya closed her eyes, not in sadness, but in peace. She walked out of the courtroom, past the people who once gossiped about her, past Grant and Sienna, who now looked like strangers. She felt light, free. The limousine was waiting. She stepped inside. She didn't look back. There was nothing behind her worth seeing. She was moving forward, into her own future. The black limousine glided through the city like a quiet whisper. Inside, Arya sat still. Her back was straight. Her hands were folded gently. The soft silk of her gown glowed in the sunlight coming through the windows. Her reflection stared back at her. Not scared, but strong. She wasn't going to a fight. She was going to say goodbye to a lie. When the limousine stopped in front of the Fulton County Courthouse, a few news people were there. They weren't invited, but Arya wasn't surprised. Grant had always liked being important, and people talked. A few cameras were ready. When Arya stepped out, heads turned. She didn't flinch. She walked forward, her dress catching the wind. People whispered. Cameras clicked, but Arya heard only her own footsteps and her own thoughts. I am not what they called me. I am who I choose to be. At the top of the steps, Grant stood. He looked just like before. Fancy suit, expensive tie, same smell. But he wasn't the same. He looked unsure. His eyes kept moving. Sienna stood beside him, arms crossed, face tight. She couldn't meet Arya's eyes. Arya walked past them both, her face calm. Inside, the courtroom was filled with quiet tension. Dorian was already there, waiting. He gave her a small nod. She sat beside him, smoothing her dress. Across the room, Grant sat down. Sienna stayed behind in the crowd. She looked nervous, like she had only just realized this wasn't the show she thought it would be. The court clerk called the room to order. The judge walked in. She was an older black woman with glasses and wise eyes. We are here today for the annulment of Roberts versus Roberts, she said. Lawyers, you may begin. Dorian stood. He didn't yell. He didn't rush. He spoke clearly. He showed the judge papers that proved everything. Fake loans, forged signatures, the times Grant was in trouble with money. There were handwriting experts and witness letters too. The room was very quiet, just paper rustling and pens scratching. Grant's lawyer kept trying to argue. He said Grant didn't mean harm, that it was all a mistake. But Dorian calmly answered every time. Then it was Arya's turn again. She stood. I was 24 when I married Grant, she said softly. I believed in him. I gave up my job to help him. I took care of our home. I raised our child. I trusted him. She paused, and while I was doing all that, he was using my name to take out loans I didn't know about. While I cooked dinner, while I helped our son with homework, while I gave and never asked for much. He acted like my name was his to use. That's not love. That's not a real marriage. That's not even legal. The judge listened closely. Grant looked down. Sienna fidgeted. I'm not here to get back at him, Arya said. I'm here because what we had wasn't real. It was a show. I meant it. He didn't. That matters. She sat down. Dorian gave her arm a gentle touch, not to comfort her, just to say, you did great. The judge called for a short break. In the hallway, Grant came up to Arya. Sienna was gone. Arya, he said quietly, it doesn't have to end like this. She looked at him calmly. It already ended, Grant. It ended when you stopped treating me like a real person. I was trying to build something. No, she added, you were trying to fix your mess, and you used me to do it. He looked like he wanted to argue, but he stopped. I didn't think you'd really do it, he admitted. I know, Arya said. Then she turned and walked away. Back in the courtroom, the judge came back. After hearing everything, she said, I believe there is enough proof to give the annulment. This marriage is now null and void. The financial parts will be looked at later. She banged her gavel. It was done. Arya stood. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She breathed. Outside, the sun had come out. The limousine was waiting. Some cameras were still there, but fewer now. The reporters had lost interest without drama. Sienna left quickly through a side door. She didn't answer anyone's questions. Grant came out a little later. He didn't look at Arya. She stepped into the limousine. The door closed softly. The noise of the city stayed outside. She leaned back, took a deep breath, and let it all go. The car drove away from the courthouse. She didn't look back. There was nothing left there for her. That night, she sat with Dorian and Mira at home. They drank tea and ate strawberry shortcake. Mira had brought it from a bakery near her hotel. You didn't just win, Mira said with a smile. You ended it on your terms. I didn't want to fight dirty, Arya said. And you didn't, Dorian replied. You fought with truth, and you won. Jalen had gone to bed early. The apartment was quiet. The dishwasher hummed, and they laughed softly, knowing something special had happened that day. Arya stepped out onto the balcony. She looked out at the big city. The lights in the distance blinked softly, and the wind played with the curly hair around her face. Inside the house, she heard Mira talking to Dorian. They were remembering fun summers they had when they were kids in a place called Savannah. The sound of their voices made her feel warm and happy. Arya looked up at the sky. She had no ring on her finger, no fancy title. It was just her. And for the first time in a very long time, that felt just right. The next morning, the sunlight gently touched everything in Arya's new home. It felt like the whole world was taking a peaceful breath. Her house sat on the edge of the city. It wasn't too far in, and it wasn't way out in the suburbs either. It was a small house with 2 bedrooms. The shutters were old and white, the porch was a little bumpy, and the yard needed some love. There were no shiny kitchen counters, no fancy entryway, no big staircase or glass rooms. But it was her house. Arya bought it with her own money. She made the choice. It was her key that opened the door. Every time she came home, the house was quiet. No voices except hers and her son Jalen's. That made it feel special, like a safe place. She stood in the kitchen with bare feet, holding her favorite old mug. She sipped her warm coffee and looked out the window. The wind gently moved the hibiscus flowers near the fence. Jalen had already left for school, riding his bike down the little gravel path to catch the school bus. His happy laughter still stayed in the air. The house felt quiet, but it didn't feel sad. It felt calm and peaceful. She had learned to call it peace. On the windowsill above the sink sat her journal. It had bent corners from many months of writing through hard times. She opened it and looked through pages filled with pain and betrayal. Her writing used to be angry and shaky, but now her words looked steady and soft. On the last page, just 2 days ago, she had written a special sentence. She had even whispered it out loud like a promise. I forgave myself for staying too long. I thanked myself for leaving in time. She gently closed the journal and let the sunlight shine on it. That afternoon, Mira came to visit. She brought a box of new bed sheets and a container of homemade soup. They laughed as they fixed up the guest room. They hung curtains and fluffed pillows. They talked at the same time like sisters do when sadness is gone and happiness is coming back. You know, Mira said as she fixed the quilt, this room feels like a beginning, not just a spare room. Arya smiled and said, It is. Everything about this place is. Later, they sat on the porch with glasses of cold ginger lemonade. The wind played with their hair and the sky turned purple and blue. They didn't need to talk. Their silence felt nice and warm, like they were sharing a secret without saying a word. That night, after Mira went home and Jalen went to bed, Arya opened her laptop. She had a video interview scheduled. It was for a show called She Rises. The show told real stories about brave and strong women. At first, Arya wasn't sure if she wanted to do it. She didn't want her pain to be on camera, but something about the host's message felt kind and safe, like a place where she could tell her story without pretending. The host smiled warmly and said, We're so happy you're here, Arya. Share what feels right to you. Arya nodded and said, I'm ready. They started with simple questions about her work and a community project. Then the questions got deeper. When did you know it was time to walk away? The host asked gently. Arya took a deep breath and said, It wasn't just one moment. It was many little things. The silence that hurt, looking in the mirror and not knowing who I was. I stopped asking why he did what he did. I started asking why I stayed. The host's eyes got shiny with tears. Everyone behind the camera stayed very quiet. Arya read a few lines from her journal, not the saddest ones, but the most honest ones. She shared a sentence she had written the night her marriage officially ended. I don't want revenge. I want to heal, and I owe that to myself. The video was posted online and quickly became popular. Women from all over the country sent messages. Some said thank you. Some shared their own stories. Some just wrote, Me too. The next day, Dorian called and said, You didn't just speak. You started something. I just said what I wish someone had told me, Arya replied. Life kept going in a soft and sweet way. Every Friday night became special. Dorian brought pastries, Mira cooked something warm, and they sat on the porch telling stories and laughing together. They didn't talk about what they lost anymore. They talked about what they could still build. One day, Arya stood in front of the mirror and made a surprise decision. She booked a haircut. At the salon, the hairdresser greeted her kindly and placed a clean cape over her shoulders. "What are we doing today?" the hairdresser asked. "Something different," Arya said with a smile. "Something free." When the haircut was done, she looked in the mirror. She almost didn't recognize herself. Her new hairstyle was short and beautiful, framing her face like a crown. Her eyes looked clear and strong. She didn't look like someone trying to heal. She looked like someone who had grown. After the haircut, she went to a small store and bought 2 outfits that made her feel bold and happy. A soft ivory jumpsuit and a plum-colored dress that fit her just right. That evening, she showed the clothes to Mira and Dorian. She spun around like a dancer in front of the mirror. "You look like someone who knows how special she is," Mira whispered. "I'm starting to believe I do," Arya said with a smile. In the weeks after that, she started therapy again. She had stopped before because Grant, her ex, made fun of it. But now her new therapist was kind and also honest. Every talk they had helped Arya let go of something heavy. The therapist once said, "Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means not letting the pain tell your story anymore." Arya left that day feeling light and strong, but her past still had one more thing to say. One morning, Dorian called her with important news. They found something else bad Grant had done. He had signed her name on a paper without asking. He used her name in a business deal she never knew about. "He did it again," Dorian said. "He used your name to do something risky. We can take him to court." Arya looked at the paper and saw her name next to Grant's. She said quietly, "He didn't just cheat on me, he used me on purpose." Dorian said firmly, "Then we won't just move on. We'll make sure he faces what he did." When the new court hearing came, Arya wasn't scared. She was clear and calm. Grant thought he could get away with it, but truth has its own time and strength. The court was quiet, no news cameras or crowds, just Arya, Dorian, Grant, and Grant's tired lawyer. The judge looked at the papers, listened to everyone, and said Arya was right. Grant would have to pay for what he did. Grant walked away silently. As Arya and Dorian left the court, she didn't feel like a winner. She felt whole. Time passed. Spring became summer. The days got longer and warmer. Life started to feel bright again. One Saturday morning, Arya stood on the porch with her tea. The sunlight warmed the grass. She watched Jalen draw pictures on the sidewalk with chalk, spirals, suns, and superhero names. "You want to help?" he called out. "Always," Arya said, stepping barefoot into the yard. That night, when the house was quiet, Arya walked through each room slowly. She touched the hallway mirror, the kitchen table, the books on her shelf. Nothing was fancy, but everything was hers. Everything was real. She opened her journal one last time and wrote on the last page, "I learned that love should never make you forget who you are. I learned that peace is quiet but powerful. I learned that starting over isn't a bad thing, it's a gift." She put down the pen and closed the journal. The next morning, she began a brand new day. No party, no big event, just an open window, a quiet room, and a woman who had once felt lost, now writing her own story. And this time, the story truly belonged to her. Thanks for watching. If you liked the story, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Check out our other videos too. See you in the next one.